Consciousness, I would say, is at its core level is the observer. It's the awareness. And before my coma, in the ignorance that I had being in academic neurosurgery and subscribing to the neuroscientific models of the 20th century, I would have thought that maybe I might have even been confused enough to think that consciousness is the little voice in the head. And of course, I've come to realize, no, that is little more than a parlor trick. I know that the parts of the brain that are responsible for generating the voice in the head and the thoughts and the rational thinking, the linguistic human brain, which is tightly tied to ego and self, and the parts of the brain that are part of defining and limiting, again, part of the linguistic brain. But these are two very small regions, the speech production and speech interpretation, are tiny aspects of the neocortex. And they are not consciousness at all. And yet, of course, we're so consumed with this kind of worship of ego, self, linguistic brain, rational thought, and all of that we really kind of lose sight of the fact that our own consciousness is actually something far deeper and more mysterious than that. And it really is that the awareness part of us, the part that knows of its own existence and of the existence of a universe. What I think is kind of broadly termed the hard problem of consciousness is indeed the most vexing conundrum known to all of human thought. In its kind of simplest form, I would say the hard problem of consciousness is telling, the way to put it to the layperson is that no neuroscientist on earth, in spite of increasing devotion of study of the physical brain, that no neuroscientist on earth can even offer the first sentence about how the physical brain might create consciousness. I would say that a lot of those interested in neuroscience, philosophy of mind, who study this problem, realize the more we know about the physical brain, the more we realize it's not the creator of consciousness. It's very clearly related to consciousness. But again, it's important to see that it's more of a reducing valve or filter. And often colleagues will challenge me and say, wait a minute, you're saying that this whole mystery of deep in your coma as your brain was more destroyed by this bacterial meningitis actually was the blinders coming off and your awareness getting much more crisp and real. They say that makes no sense. Well, I would point out two very commonly observed clinical phenomena that all neurologists and neuroscientists are aware of some of these examples. One is of terminal lucidity, which I point out in the book Proof of Heaven. The fact that often that elderly demented patients, as they get closer to death, can have these oases of very clear thinking, memory, interaction, great clarity of thought that completely defies any kind of explanation of brain creates consciousness. And of course, the other very commonly observed phenomena have to do with what's called the idiot savant or acquired savant syndrome, where some kind of brain damage, like a stroke or head trauma, autism, leads to uncovering of some oasis of superhuman mental function. And those episodes of these savant syndromes are very, very common. I had many of them when I was very active in neurosurgery. I would see these things where people would have some kind of brain damage, and it actually uncovered this incredible superhuman ability of memory, of calculation, of abilities to graphically represent things, musical creativity, things like that emerged out of nowhere. But also, I often like to point out that Wilder Penfield, probably one of the most renowned neurosurgeons of the 20th century, who probably still holds the record for electrical stimulation of the brain in awake patients, tens of thousands of episodes in his work on epilepsy. He worked in Montreal. And he wrote a book in 1975 called The Mystery of the Mind. He realized that never once in all those tens of thousands of stimulations did he uncover an event that seemed to be a free will event of conscious experience. The patients always felt like they were puppets on a string, no matter what the memory, the experience, whatever they went through, they always knew that it was something triggered. But basically, if you're trying to find free will and consciousness, soul or spirit, it's not created in the brain at all. In fact, I would say the brain, as we were discussing earlier with the idiot savant and that kind of thing, the brain is really more limiting. It's basically shackles. And that's essentially what near-death experiencers have been trying to tell us for millennia. Mystics who have had similar spiritually transformative experiences have been trying to put out there that, in fact, when we're freed up from the shackles of our physical brain and released from that illusion of here and now, we actually come into a much higher knowing. And that's, of course, what they come back and bring with them when near-death experiencers come back to this world, is this profound understanding of the deeper nature of consciousness when we're not limited by the physical human brain.